we have an international panel now. If our colleagues can pull up the speaker overview, please. We have Tamas Braun, and he flew in from London today. That's why we had to switch around the whole agenda. Tamas, please join me here. And then also let me invite Johannes Seebacher from Riskine as well. Perfect. Thanks for joining me. So, interesting panel. Why? Because you're very diverse. Let me give you this as well for the audience to be able to basically hear us. You're a very diverse panel because of different things. One, Tamas Braun, you're the head of international sales at W.UP by FinTech. It's a merged company. You had BSC from the Czech Republic, and you had also W.UP from Hungary. You merged into FinTech. It is all about digital banking, data-driven personalization. So this is the FinTech side, digital banking side. And then we have Johannes Seebacher. He will be more the InsurTech side from Riskine. They also, like we heard before, a lot about digitalizing customer experience, customer also advice, driven by algorithms and data. And you as CTO and founder also have a very technical background. You were a developer yourself for many years. And then also Tamas had a lot of insights from banks, JP Morgan and others that you worked with. So I'm really looking forward to this diverse topics that we will be hopefully discussing. Okay. Yeah. So what do we want to cover today? Why have I asked the both of you? First off, I would like to actually maybe start with you, Johannes, for Riskine. Why Riskine? What is your model? And why have you started it as a startup and not just joining one of the corporates?
So our founding idea was actually, so my founding partner, Ralph Whitman, also comes from insurance background like me. Both came from Allianz. And the founding idea came from his opening a letter by Allianz. I think it was, or a different insurer, to not make any, not give any bad names. And he didn't understand the policy update that he got. So he came from insurance, and he was working as a consultant for many years at Roland Berger insurance practice, and he could not understand why a certain coverage was added to his policy, and he wanted to understand why, and search for a digital tool to investigate that, and he couldn't find one. So that was the original idea, and so that was basically solve the information asymmetry that is prevalent in insurance, and especially in insurance advice. So insurance companies know a lot about customers, but they don't tell the customer. They don't want to. Is maybe not correct. Maybe they can't. Maybe it's too complicated. Maybe it's too complicated also for the customer. Maybe too complicated for the advisor to package the information. For example, how big is the customer's risk? So the customer is told a price and basically a recommendation. You should buy this product with this coverage, but not really the reason. So not your risk is like this, and you should cover it like that. And this was basically the kickoff. And I mean, the reason why we did not start that in corporate is manifold, but maybe that there's an intrinsic reason, and that's insurance companies traditionally model this risk problem from their perspective, from a complete or aggregated portfolio view. And this has certain mathematical background. There's a huge theoretical body. Actuaries actually studied that myself. And if you take now the customer's point of view and want not to understand one line of business, as the insurers call it, and make a model of all the policies out there in this one line of business, but want to understand from the customer point of view all my risks, and then aggregate it somehow and make it understandable and get some insight out of it, then you need completely different mathematical models. And there's there's not the appetite, and also not the theoretical background at insurance companies, and so that's why we went on this journey on our own, and also because it's more fun, in our opinion, at least.
That's interesting. So I'm really looking forward to what the insurance companies and the banks will be saying to this later.
Yes.
So, Tamas, how about your journey? Because digital banking, customer engagement, personalization, we hear about it so many years already. Is there still room? Why do you think, as W.UP or FinShape, you want to go into that space still as a startup?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly, our history is in digital banking, right? Especially if we look at FinShape as a larger group. We have our colleagues and partners in the Czech Republic have been around from 1997, right? So they started on day zero in digital banking. And the idea between merging W.UP and BSC was that now we're marrying a digital banking competency with data analytics and data and personalization. And I think that's very rare on the market. So if you look at large digital banking or AI or personalization companies, they all do their own special thing, which is either digital banking or AI. But we rarely see a company which is industry specific. It's created for banking, all the use cases, all the insights, and it's married together end to end to deliver a customer experience on top of this. Because I think that's the challenge for many of the banks, and we'll talk about this later when we discuss the challenges, is that, yeah, AI is great, and I can fully resonate with Georg in a previous presentation that there are some challenges and lessons we can learn. But then I think one of the challenges is the so what? What do you do with that insight which you just figured out? If it's anti-money laundering or fraud, it's fairly simple. If it's customer experience, then the customers are looking at you as like, great, so what do I do with that? And I think that's our answer in FinShape. We'll help you with that as a bank.
And if you would need to describe yourself in just one sentence, what is your offering?
It's personalized digital banking. If I'd say anything else, marketing will cut my head off, basically.
Okay. What about you and Riskine? Do you have a one-liner for us? And the second challenge, a bit more deeper, what kind of data do you really use?
One-liner is intelligent digital advice, and maybe two-liner is B2B software as a service, and mainly focused on APIs, but also offering all the things around. And towards the data that we use, so we're faced with this challenge where we have to cover the complete spectrum of financial advice, and that includes insurance space, kind of the risk space, but also increasingly investment advice and also credit advice. So now you offer this to other players, to companies, and they have a very limited spectrum of that. So maybe one insurer focuses on health insurance only, etc., etc. So we have very diverse offering, and so this means also we use very diverse data. But I have maybe some good examples. And a place where we started is to take open source, open data sets to model natural catastrophe risk. So there's a lot of different data sets out there, open, semi-open, commercial, that we kind of began to stitch together. So you have to imagine geo data sets, which come in different forms and shapes. TIFFs, which are basically images. Then you have shape files and all sorts of things, and we stitch it together to a global model that can, based on geolocation, for example, predict what is the flood risk at your address, and then based on that, how should you insure against that flood risk.
So when you talk about use cases to the both of you, what were the most impactful ones that you've implemented with some of your clients? Impactful, a lot of thinking. I'm already seeing that.
That's a tough one, right? So
it is.
I think, what we do in financial services is that we help banks and financial institutions to find the useful insights out of data. Now, the usefulness of that insight could be measured by the institution, the bank itself, in terms of whether you were able to do product proposition, upselling, cross-selling, all the other KPIs normally a bank would look at. And there could be very good impact on those numbers. So this is one part of it. And I think, we worked a lot with Raiffeisen Bank International. We are working with them a lot. And there were some really good numbers in terms of conversion rates and the impact on the conversion rates of certain campaigns. So purely using insights, which we thought would be very useful to increase that KPI. So this is one part. And I think, across different kind of campaigns to cross-sell products, this was very meaningful. On the other side, however, when you talk about the impact on customers, right? That's a bit more tricky, because how do you measure that, right? So a lot of our competitors, and we've seen many other use cases where they provide insights to customers on categorized transactions, like you spent 15% more on holidays than last month. And this to me is a so what, right? So thank you, I just booked my summer holidays. So why are you telling me this insight, which is not even AI? It's a very simple averaging, which an 8-year-old could do. So I think the impact on that is less. You have to do it as a basic, right? So I think some customers are eager to see information like that. But then you need to go one step beyond, because I think the reality is that data just doesn't sit as well as stories do, for example, in people's mind. Because stories would have emotions and data doesn't. So you need to package this up in insights or stories, and this is Money Stories is what we launched to do this, to actually resonate customers or to communicate or engage customers on these insights. If you don't do that, your AI will fall flat and your people will not look at this. I mean, customers. And I think that's the biggest challenge. So the success stories of that is that, for example, if you translate this to smart loyalty offers, which are relevant, meaningful, people actually care, and they're interested in that loyalty offer, you already won, and the impact is very measurable. So we've done something like this again with Raiffeisen International, one of the subsidiaries, which I think was very, very good. But you can go into carbon emissions, and it's a journey. We're not there yet. But again, to start that engagement with customers, to educate, communicate carbon emissions of their consumptions, I think that's another very good success story. If you achieve something on that level as a first step, you're already on the right path. And of course, you need to work on that. AI is a journey. It's not just a step.
I mean, Johannes, do you agree, or something to add on how to create this customer engagement, how to really get impact?
Well, I was thinking about it, and we at least regularly measure the impact on customers in service and things like that. And this is actually what I wanted to start with. And for sure, our most impactful product so far is the risk analysis, which is used in insurance advice and answering the question in an advisory situation for the customer by the advisor. Which risks does the customer have, and which insurance products does he need based on this assessment? And we started out not with businesses as customer, but we POC'd actually with the Consumer Protection Agency, with the VKI here in Austria. And so we really started from the customer side, and we always integrated this questionnaire, asking things like, do you understand your risks better on a scale from X to X? Or is your trust in your decision increased? So this is I would say our most important KPIs on the customer side. And then on business side, of course, it's increased sales and less churn. So this is measurable very directly and for quite a few years now in a lot of our customers.
Maybe just listening to this, maybe there's a third one as well, which is the impact on the organization. Because a lot of traditional organizations are set up and structured in a way that they're not able to take advantage of all the good things we've seen here, right? So you need to create an organization structure which is able to understand data and to think data-driven. And of course, that's fundamental, right? So you could have little siloed team who would do marvelous things, potentially with a very good impact on both customers and the business. But if the units are not set up, or the structure of the bank is not set up in a way to take advantage of that, 95% of these use cases will not actually go into production. And that's a waste.
So basically insights around data cleaning, data governance, before you can really start the integration of new data cases.
Sharing democratizing data, access to these insights, all very important.
I mean, is there anything else that you see as a barrier? Because both of your organizations work with partners. That's your model. So any other barriers on top of this data availability, data governance, and data cleaning when working with corporates?
I've got one which we call the integration hell. I'm sure if you're from banks, then you know what I'm talking about. So if you work with partners, nowadays everyone is API and interfacing with APIs and whatnot. But still it comes to a cacophony of different vendors from globally, from different parts of the world, going after their own agenda. And even within an organization, everyone is driving slightly different agendas. And when it comes to integration, it's just sometimes after a few years, it gets messy, right? So you have, again, different vendors, different solutions. Some of them are overlapping. Some of them are in direct conflict with each other. How do you make sense something out of that for something like this? How do you make sure that your data is governed, structured, created in real time in a format which potentially 6, 7, 10 different banks across your organizations or subsidiaries can take advantage of? That's very, very difficult. I think this is what we worked with our client Raiffeisen in the last 2-3 years, is to have a common data model and to democratize access to this by the subsidiaries of Raiffeisen so they can use this for different use cases. So that's I think, a very important structure to make this available to different use cases in different countries. And that's a barrier in a lot of organizations.
So making it useful for different countries, different companies.
Different use cases, different agendas, everything else, yes.
I mean, for the insurtech sector, Johannes, it's very localized, oftentimes, also regulated in a sense, maybe different, you tell me, different than banking. So what are your challenges that you're seeing in terms of collaboration, in terms of scaling the solutions?
So I think in terms of collaboration, what Tamas said is true. So I, of course, don't see it from corporate's perspective. I don't have an integration hell yet, but it is a huge challenge to find kind of the right APIs. So this is something we're constantly challenging ourselves in, and integration is also part of our rollouts, of course. But this is a very, very generic challenge, not really pertaining to insurtech. The thing you have in insurtech is, or insurance in general, and this you also see in the standardization efforts that are going on in quotation APIs. So you have in many countries, you have one association standardizing the data model and the API structure with which you can digitally buy an insurance, basically. And this the problem is that the data is so complicated and has so much detail in it. For example, how do you define a car or a house, and all the little Nebengebäude, the side buildings of the house, and how big are they, and what kind of equipment do they have? Does the swimming pool have a coverage, and those things? So you have this huge struggle on settling on a data model, kind of, and there is no standard data model, so you always have to map everything. And there are many efforts going on in this direction. We also have thrown our approach into the field. It's called the Open Insurance Ontology. You can check it out on GitHub. Actually, we open sourced it. And this is one of our approaches to tackle this challenge, to put forward our standard data model and make it for use, make it open for use. But still.
And now I'll pick up actually something from the audience. So how do you harmonize, centralize the data or features across the organization on a data model? Because we mentioned before, data is often very local or very country specific. I think that this goes to both of you.
Harmonize.
Exactly. Yeah. Harmonize and centralize the data. How?
I think it took one of our clients, so again, going back to that example I mentioned, Raiffeisen, at least a good 6 months to figure out that common data model, which would satisfy a large number of use cases across the organization. And that was basically fundamental to ask the subsidiaries to comply with that common data model, to make sure that they get to a position of maturity in these subsidiaries to send some of them in batch, but some of them in real time data to this common data model. And once that's there, then you've got on another layer, of course, the models, the enrichments and AI and everything else on top of it, which then works with the same common data model. So theoretically, this opens up the possibility for one country to send the data into the common data model. It's hosted in AWS, by the way, it's all cloud. And then take advantage of use cases and insights, which maybe another country worked on, but it's very much applicable to that country as well. Right, so this knowledge sharing would then start, and then initially it starts on a technology level that I can share insights with my other subsidiaries, but then people will start conversing and not sharing knowledge around these use cases as well. So I think this is the harmonization, at least from a technical perspective. But then again, going forward, this is hugely relevant to see what works, what doesn't work in certain geographies and certain countries, because there are niche use cases which might be very applicable to country X, which simply wouldn't work or wouldn't work the same way in country Y. And I think, no matter what the common data model or the algorithms or the use cases, if that thing which you're trying to predict doesn't exist in another country, then this is simply the performance of that model will not work, right? So then of course, it's a question of how do you make sure that people understand, which I think Georg talked about, that AI is not a magic bullet. You have algorithms, you have a common data model, you can look at the performance of that algorithm in different countries, different geographies, regions, but then you need to make sure that it actually is meaningful to your business or the business goal you're trying to have the case with that model.
Anything to add, Johannes?
Yeah, maybe we can go a bit deeper technologically here. So we currently follow the approach. Our data model in our house is super tight, extremely tight, and super strict across microservices. So we allow the very small teams to handle the microservices as they want, but have a super strict and tight data model. So, but at the same time, we have huge customers. So there is this proportion where we're about 30, 40 people, and our customers are 30,000 people. So they want to dictate how the API looks. So at the same time, we need capabilities for them to alter the data as they send it in. But as it passes a certain barrier into our world, then it's harmonized. And this we achieve with a very strict microservice architecture.
And now something we talked about now, basically your model. We talked about how to scale within organizations and collaboration. I now would still like to touch upon the future. What do I mean by this? I mean, if there are no constraints from organizations, if there's no constraints on budget, if there's no constraint on time to market, what do you still see in your areas to be the future of data and AI? What use cases? What applications without barriers? I want you to dream a bit. That's why they both have to think.
No, actually not. So this has been our long-term vision for quite some time now. Is basically for end customers to have some kind of agent on their phone or on their whatever that is capable of ingesting all the data that is living in all their other applications. So let's say a banking application, but also can go through their email and so on, which is super tight security-wise, and then can spit out real-time advice, but also prompted advice. So, and is able to discuss deeply about the decision, should I buy a house or not, and what could be the implications on various levels on my financial situation. And this whole thing would be offered as a service for financial service providers to use for their customers.
And if you can dream, Tamas, no barriers.
It's kind of related to that, right? So the reason why the big tech companies, the Googles, the Amazon, and even Apple, these guys want to get into, I'm not saying banking, but certainly payments or some elements of financial services, is because the data is gold in this case, right? So if you have a fundamental understanding of what customers do or how they live their life or how they spend their money, then of course you can better serve them, both within banking and outside or beyond banking. So imagine a situation, and this goes maybe not so far into the future, is that you're trying to book your holidays for this summer. A lot of people tend to go to booking.com and just search for a hotel in a particular location. Let's say it's Barcelona. Now, booking.com will try to recommend you hotels based on your previous booking, based on what's available, blah, 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 and a whole lot of algorithms are working in the background. If customers' understanding the bank's understanding of customer behavior is so good from transactional data, then why is it that the two are not connected? Why can I not go on to booking.com and get a hotel booking recommended to me, or a hotel recommended to me, which is according to how much I paid for previously for hotels, what kind of hotels were they, how often I go and visit hotels. It's all in my transaction history, how much I spent, how frequently, and so on and so on, and more of the enrichment as well of it. So could I get an experience which goes beyond banking when I try to book my holiday that please, I get a hyper-personalized offer to my taste, to my wife's taste as well. It's all in the data. It's all in the insights. Just no one is doing it. So I think that's hopefully a not so distant future. And this is just hotel booking, but it could be many thousands of other things in life as well. And of course, data governance, data sharing, access to data, open banking, PSD2, all fundamental in this. And I think we need to agree on how this works. But to the customers, that's a big impact on how I book my travel holidays.
Mm-hmm. So still some room to go. I hear it from the both of you. Still some use cases and room to go. We only, I would say, touched upon the surface, because the scalability in the future, basically in 20 minutes. But as promised to everyone that is participating today, you can still network and ask your questions later, and also to you online. And we will still pick up your questions as well, and you can connect to the speakers. So Tamas and Johannes, thank you so much for your FinTech view, not only listening to banks and insurance companies, but to really the startup and scale up side. So thanks to both of you, and let's give them a big clap.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks for having us.